And you're live.
All right, House Education, Wednesday, March 26, 2025, considering continuing discussion on strike all amendment to H 454. We're going to try to pick up where we left off as legislative council walks us through what's in front of us. Just as we get to things that we've never seen before, again, just would emphasize these are things that are on the table and available for discussion. Beth, is there anything that you need to point out to us that has changed since the last version that we have not gotten to yet?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Ask that again.
Is there anything that we've already been through that you have changed as opposed to things that you may have done in areas that we haven't even hit yet?
Yes, nothing that we've walked through this morning has changed in this draft.
Okay,
I've started making the small amount of changes that we've talked
Okay.
about thus far in a separate draft.
okay. Who can tell us where we left off?
Page 24.
I even put a timestamp on
I
it.
believe
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
people might be emailing you.
Yes.
Well, that is correct. People are.
I mean, might be emailing all of them.
Except me, I got left off.
Except you.
Yeah,
You're not on the list?
It wasn't on
You
one
want us
that,
to put out there
others-
for clarification?
it did appear that my email address was in a
Ah.
group thing, but it didn't get included in the email.
Did you go to your state?
Okay, so we are at section 8, school board authority to close
Yeah,
the
I got-
school.
Absolutely.
Is further discussion, do people want to say anything further about that? Have a further discussion about it? I would just say, you heard me on the floor, those of you who paid attention, when Representative LaRoche asked about how we
Yeah.
move things forward, this is the kind of thing that I meant by courageous votes. Yeah.
So just a clarification, because there is also a process for the State Board of Education to close a school that's different than this, right? So
That's right.
those don't conflict with each other when it says they have the authority, right?
Can I answer that question? Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. That's a great question, and I've actually made that change in the new draft that you don't have in front of you because I'm going to wait until you give me all of your changes at one time.
Yeah.
And I've added, so section 8 would say, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the school board of a school district shall have the sole authority to close a public school, provided, however, that the state board may close a school or schools pursuant to, and then I refer up to that. So yes, I caught that too. Excellent point, and I've added that.
Gold star.
Yeah, speaking of gold stars.
We get
Okay,
it.
thank you.
All right.
I'm still really uncomfortable with this. I mean, you use the phrase like courageous votes, and I just don't know how I don't know which is the right side to be on here, because as Vermont towns, we have made hard decisions over many centuries at town meetings. And I don't think we're incapable as a town of coming together and making hard decisions, given the right evidence and the right encouragement to do the best for our kids. But I think it feels better when it's a town decision. I don't know. I really don't know how to feel about that. People are already upset. In the 2 hours since we've had this conversation, I know that people are upset, and I think they have legitimate cause to be.
This does not, this is a hard one. There's no question about it. This does not stop any town or group of citizens from petitioning their school board, speaking to their school board. This also really doesn't stop the school board from saying, well, we'll do a straw vote or something like that in a community that might be
Yeah.
closing the school.
Is there a way to get language in here that yes, it lies with the school board, and we strongly encourage the school boards to speak to their community before they make this decision? I mean, obviously any good school board would, but
I'm not sure I'd call that appropriate to a piece of legislation. But
you can't make do the right thing legislation.
Do the right thing.
yes,
This language, this is supported by School Boards Association, right?
yeah, Superintendent Association.
And superintendent.
As far as I know, at least the Superintendent Association, I think the School Boards Association. Yes. Confirmation of everybody's. Did the VSBA take a position on removing the veto power of towns and the school closure, removing that from articles of agreement.
Sue Siglowski, Executive Director of Vermont School Boards Association. I don't remember that being in the VSA transformation framework, but if
It had come up in, like, last year it came up, I think.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I can certainly get back to you about that.
I don't,
I do remember VSA having a position on it last year. Yeah.
I don't want to beleaguer this, but I do, it does sort of beg the question, do we know how many schools are in, I mean, many schools aren't in the position to have this in change, take effect. I mean, you know, some school boards already do. So it's articles of agreement and the ones that specifically say it lays with the town. Do we know how many school districts
So
have those
based
articles
on
of agreement?
what I have heard is the best answer I can give you is most.
Most have articles of agreement, period, and most have
No, all have, I assume all have articles of agreement, but most have the
language.
language requiring a town to close the school.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was it was in the VSA's position.
Most
Removing,
recent- the most recent
removing the.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
which was
here.
then endorsed
I
by
knew that.
the
Yeah.
SBA.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
All right. We can come back to things that people all of a sudden have a great clairvoyant thought on something. We'll move on to section 9.
So we are on page 24, line 15, prohibition on school closure and transition to paying tuition. Notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, a school district shall be prohibited from closing an existing public school and then providing for the education of its resident students by paying tuition for its students to attend a public or approved independent school chosen by the parents of the district's students. A school district that closes an existing public school shall provide for the education of its resident students by designating 3 or fewer public schools to serve as the public school or schools of the district in accordance with 16 VSA 827, which is the designation section.
So just to speak to this section for a moment. This is assuming current state, not future state. Future state, this would be a sort of within the district solution. So this is in the period between now and then, that if a school district closes its school, because remember, there are also school districts that have lots of schools, where they would just continue to educate students within their district, that the students would then be assigned to or designated to attend up to 3 public schools in their area. This would fall within the sort of broader scope of scale. In other words, rather than having students leave the public school system, which hurts scale, this would be to keep them within the public school system, which hurts scale. People have questions about just what this means?
Yeah.
Yes, Rob?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
I don't understand what it means.
All right, so designation.
Right.
Will be explained by legislative council.
Good one.
Way to pass the buck.
So we're in chapter 21 in Title 16. This is where the town tuition program lives. And you've got, these are our statutes that require school districts to maintain or pay tuition, either elementary or high school. Then we've got our statutes, there's public high school choice, our statutes on tuition, maximum rate, notice of tuition charges, and then we get to 827, which is designation. And so current law is only for designation only applies for high schools. But it doesn't, you can make it apply to elementary schools. So the way it works, I'm just trying to find the right section here. So A school district that does not operate a high school could choose to designate 3 or fewer approved independent or public high schools as the high school of the district. That's a two-way street. So the school board or the school district would have to decide, we'd like you to be one of our public schools. And then the school that they're designating would have to agree to that designation. And that designation can be between a public school and a public school, or a school district and a public school outside of the school district, or a public school and an approved independent school located, wherever it makes geographic sense for those students. And then there are tuition provisions on how that happens, on what that means for the tuition. Similar to what would be happening if it was individual tuitioning choices. So designation is just what it sounds like. The students in that district could not go to the school of their choice. They would have to go to the designated high school. If there were 3 designated high schools, I'm making an assumption here that the school board would have a policy on whether there's open choice or there was some apportionment. But let's say for the sake of argument that a school board only designated 1 high school, the students living in that school district would only be going to that high school on public funds. There would be no choice in the way that non-operating districts have choice, where you can go wherever you want as long as it's an approved school. Does that make sense?
I'll just say roughly,
Some current stuff.
This is all current, yep.
we do have at least one district in the state that does it, that's Thetford.
Yeah.
So all kids from Thetford that want to attend high school, not paid for by their parents, go to Thetford Academy.
Yep.
And also in exchange, Thetford Academy says we accept all students from Thetford. And I just did, this is within that current state framework. In the future state, we really wouldn't have non-operating districts or even districts that then become non-operating. All districts are operating. Primary sort of baseline shared with the original 454 that we have.
Designating 3 or fewer schools right now is current law.
Yes.
For those that choose to designate.
We changed it in like 2018 or 16 or something, from 1 to 3.
Other questions, comments, discussion points?
Just trying to think.
I have a discussion point on our last section when we're ready to go back.
All right, okay, Leanne.
I'm wondering if we could change the date that the school boards decide that to July 1st, 2026 instead of July 1st, 2025, just to give communities more time to plan.
I think that's a
No.
good compromise.
Well,
Go ahead, Beth.
doesn't the 2025 just refer to when the articles of agreement happen?
Yes.
It's not when the school boards do it, right? That
Well, first of all,
Maybe
I
I'm reading it
haven't
wrong.
heard of any school board talking about closing a school. So it's not like July 1st, 2025 is gonna happen and all of a sudden.
Right.
School boards are gonna. Because
Right,
as those of us who have been there, it ain't easy.
because that date, July 1st, 2025, refers to when the articles of incorporation were adopted, not.
What if,
Oh.
could you put it up in A then? In Leanne's proposal that,
No, I think what Harple is talking about is the effective date.
Right.
Yeah.
that's it.
Correct.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Yes.
And that's not that.
And that is correct. That is not on line 13. That's referring to when the articles of incorporation were
Okay.
adopted or enacted. But this section in this draft, and we haven't even talked about effective dates yet. Currently in this draft has an effective date of July 1, 2025. So you could,
That's where you change.
that's all policy
absolutely.
for when that would be effective.
So remember that when we get to effective.
Okay,
date, that
sorry.
that's-
I would just say
Don't
that, there are potentially school boards out there who are struggling to keep schools afloat currently, and they want that ability sooner. Again, there's not a bunch of people lining up to close schools.
Right.
There's just, there's,
No, I wonder if some of what we're talking about could send people into a panic though, and they could make rash decisions now trying to anticipate like, you know, how can I shape change instead of run from change? And does that give people in communities enough time to respond and organize themselves in their response?
all right, I'm gonna say, we'll wait till we get to the effective date
Okay.
section and we can all contemplate.
Okay.
If anybody hasn't noticed, I'm kicking decisions down the road.
Are we moving on to section 10?
I guess we are.
Thanks.
Page 25, section 10. This is, there have been some updates since we looked at this language yesterday, but this is the language you all were discussing yesterday related to which types of educational institutions a school district is allowed to pay tuition to. So a public school, an approved independent school that is located in Vermont is approved under section 166. So it's an approved independent school on or before July 1, 2025. Has at least 51% of its student enrollment composed of district funded tuition students as of July 1, 2025, and complies with class size minimum requirements. And then I've added on line 16 some waiver language, provided, however, that if a school is unable to comply with class size minimum standards due to geographic isolation, or a school has developed an implementation plan to meet the class size minimum requirements, the school may ask the state board to grant it a waiver from subdivision E, which decision shall be final. So the waiver would only apply to the class size requirements, not any of the other provisions that an approved independent school would need to meet in order to be eligible to receive public tuition. And I have gone back up into our state board rule section and asked the state board, in addition to creating a review process for failure to comply, to also create a waiver process.
Thank you.
So I'm just gonna,
And then there's more schools or more educational institutions, but
so just take a moment, I'm gonna choose my words carefully, I'm quoting you, because I'm going to respond to your comments yesterday, and I mean it in the most respectful way, as you were very respectful in your comments. I don't see this as sort of selecting parts of 454 to achieve an agenda that the governor disagrees with. I think to say that we have cherry picked or been opportunistic would imply that the governor's own proposal doesn't also support restrictions on where public dollars go. As I read it, and as we had the secretary, deputy secretary, I said, your bill does not allow for any private or public dollars to go to any private independent elementary school. And they said, that is correct. So I'm just, I respectfully disagree with that, because I'm not knowing sort of what the governor's agenda is, but I'm taking it at face value in what we have heard, that it was more restrictive than what we are proposing here in his proposal.
Just to clarify, so if I'm reading this right, this is not isolated just to grades 9 through 12.
That is
This
correct.
policy is for all grades.
Yes.
Thanks for the clarification. That's what I thought.
And I will say, within this part, I'm pretty sure fell within the 454 part about school choice schools. You'll hear me say this. It's a bit of a concept that I don't quite understand a lot of the rationale for. But there is nothing stopping any school district to sort of take that same concept when they are created and create a themed school. And if you look at, if you look at sort of the governor's proposal of limiting it to 9-12 and the restrictions we have up there, That does not, there are broad swaths of Vermont that wouldn't even have any of the independent option for a school choice school. So the option to sort of create something like that, to me, is limited only by a district board's imagination, vision, and probably available real estate. It's a concept that can be created.
So just to clarify, in this, if we had public schools that all were within one district and they kind of each figured out sort of what were some passions that kids had within that district, kids could go to any of those. So there would be some choice within the public school system. Like, I'm just gonna throw out, not that OSSU is thinking of doing this, but just to like picture real schools. If like Craftsbury Academy was like environmental issues and Hazen was art school and what else is nearby? Cabot was college prep. Kids could choose what sort of thing fit them the most and go to any of those in that district.
I would say that is probably on a high level, only limited by the imagination of the school district.
Mm-hmm.
But they would, each of those schools would have to meet educational quality standards.
Right, yeah, but I'm saying if they pulled that off and they all had three sort of different niches, that could be possible,
Space is a limit sometimes.
right, within spatial acceptance.
And, can they afford to do it within funding system?
Yeah, no, I'm saying like if all that stuff was
Transportation.
possible, this is kind of what that, so people who are speaking in favor of choice would now have that choice, but within a public school system.
That was that?
I thought we had that now.
We have a limited
Nine.
public high school choice currently. But what you're saying is a little bit different. You're seeing a future state in which
Mhm.
schools have sort of themes.
Yeah,
And would you have choice within that? I would assume that would be up to how the district wanted to do it. I'm not sure you would create those sorts of thematic schools without having some sort of choice.
right,
And
it would,
it's all, I think, as you
Yeah.
said, public school choice, but that's exactly what school choice school is as well.
except we have the lottery system now, which is somewhat limited by number, like whether you get.
Lotteries are probably needed.
Yeah, and on this, what I sort of see as a difference is if we have space, we'll try and accommodate as many kids as we possibly could.
Right, but when you
Base-
reach a certain.
Yeah,
level,
yeah,
you have to have
right, of
one.
course, of course.
Yeah. Kate?
I was dreaming about districts like that too. Until it came to me that the kids in Craftsbury who really want to go to the college prep Cabot school and don't have a lift, don't have transportation, can't go. So then choice is not choice.
Right, no, you're right, and I keep falling back to that too.
And so I'd much rather see us stand up more. I'm gonna use the word, don't listen, Beth, comprehensive regional high schools.
Yeah.
That have all those programs built
Yeah.
into them, so that every kid who's going to their community high school
Right,
has the option to study what they want to study.
yeah. Unless we invested in transportation and knew that there was transportation.
And a district, I guess, could prioritize that.
I could daydream all day about all the potentials, but aren't we getting ahead of,
Yes.
now we're talking about like, what, if we're chartering new districts, all of the decisions we or education policy will have to make next year, and the duties you give boards, the confines on boards, in addition to all the stuff the Secretary of State told us that you'll have to do on the election side of. I think we're into next year's
We are into the
work
future,
plan.
we are in the
It's
future
fun to
stage.
dream, but
Yes. Yes,
I don't think it's I don't want to lose sight of what we're ranking.
that's right. We are.
Well, to me, I
only-
think it fits with the Articles of Agreement conversation that we were having,
Oh,
that
okay.
Leanne is concerned about, that I don't think we should be really thinking about shutting down those smaller elementary schools until we figure out what the bigger picture is gonna look like.
Mm.
Because it might be that it makes sense with the data that we're gonna use, the GIS data and all the other pieces of data, that maybe you need a school in that place where you were once thinking you should not have a school. I just want us to all be thinking about bigger pictures too, as we're thinking about
That's true.
future and current.
Do you want to comment on my comment?
No, because then you will comment.
Too much.
I will, if I promise not to comment on your comment, I'm not looking for the last word.
No,
either.
no, I respectfully disagree. I'm not gonna-
With what? All of it?
No. I was respectfully disagreeing with him.
Oh,
So you respectfully disagree.
You both love consensus so
Both
much. This is like, yeah, you're trying to see you both like nicely disagree with each other.
moving on.
All right.
Like Minnesotans at an intersection. There you go. There you go. And then you just crash into each other.
Oh, God.
Now we're gonna have a coalition of Minnesotans calling in.
I'll take the Minnesotans all day long.
That's
I
right.
love the Minnesotans. They teach us so much. Okay.
All right, let's continue to move down.
Can we go back?
Yes.
Have we even really talked about the 51%?
No.
Let's talk about that. What would you like to talk about? You're talking about what that means?
Well, I mean, I think I know what it means. I think it's just, it's getting more and more restrictive, I think, you know, I just think we're applying things. Again, I'll go back to my comment before. I think we're taking things and popping it in here that will benefit certain avenues, certain paths to go here. And it always seems like we are trying to be more and more restrictive on independent schools. And
Yeah,
that's about as far, I think.
Yeah, so I guess I would, Mom, I would not say, sort of saying, that an independent school is not bound by any restrictions that we put on it unless it is an independent school that accepts public tuition.
I'll go back to my comment yesterday. There are some of these private school, independent schools that could say, okay, we won't accept public tuition anymore, and they could survive on their own. And then a whole swath of students in that area would be without a school building to go to.
Yes. That is,
I'm not saying that they ever
Yeah.
would do that, but that is in the realm of possibility.
So 51%. Yesterday I asked, right, the question about where it comes, like how it plays in. And part of it is like, yes, it's from the governor's proposal, but it was based on everything that led up to it within the governor's proposal, right? It was a piece that had to do with all of it. This is taking that piece out and putting here, as I think Chris is trying to say, like you're using it saying, yes, it's from the governor's proposal, but it had a totally different, it was designed within that framework. We're trying to shoehorn it in here. So I think that's what Chris is trying to say. I'm just adding that as 2 cents on his part. It does feel quite often that there is a push to go after independent schools. And, you know, it's under the guise of public money, but it always feels like it's even beyond that, right? Like, and again, it's a feeling, it's a perception, but 3 months in, I feel that perception more and more every day. I sit here. So
it's just interesting, we are not talking about recognized schools, which are independent schools that do not seek public tuition. This is, and yes, this has been a long simmering conversation about taxpayer, from my point of view, taxpayer accountability. I would say, you know, there's a long list of things that are not contemplated here, that independent schools have a lot more freedom when it comes to that. They don't have to have licensed teachers. That has been a thorn in the side of many of the associations you see before us. But we're not envisioning that here. We aren't even saying that an independent school has to have open enrollment. Which has been frankly a thorn in my side, that we say you can fund yourself with taxpayer dollars, and you can even choose which taxpayer dollars you accept in through your door. So I mean, there's a longer list of what I would call in the category of taxpayer accountability for these schools whose, frankly, their business plan is based on taxpayer dollars. that we are not even talking about here.
And I get that, but it's a it's a very small percentage of those taxpayer dollars. I would rather work on the large 98% of the taxpayer dollars.
Which we are doing.
But there's always, I'm just saying that it does always feel like we're going after them. We should be going after the making everything better, not keep needling at what I see as independent schools or choice for that matter.
Won't me feel any better, but I think everyone feel like the rural schools, they were here this morning, they feel like we're attacking them and going after them. Teachers definitely feel like we're attacking them and going after them, and they are absolutely, struggling, as I put it very kindly, of all of our discussions and policy decisions, so I guess I kind of go back to, you set it up yesterday. We're talking about everything, we're sort of talking about everything in our whole system, A to Z. And there's challenges and pain to go around. And so again, this is not gonna make anyone feel better, but I think every part of where our public education dollars go would say they feel attacked in a different way right now.
I'll go back to the 51% that Chris brought up, because it was something that concerned me in the governor's proposal, and some of it's my lack of knowledge. And again, thinking of where I live. And this to bridge our existing state to our future state. You know, are my students where I live gonna have another option? Is there a public school option for them in the area? If right now they're going to an independent school because it's the school in the area and it doesn't have 51%. As of July 2025. Not that they won't have 50% next year or the year after, but they currently do not have 51%. And that if that choice, the only choice in town is off the table for students in my area, where are they supposed to go? And maybe they have 51%. They probably do because they take everybody. But are there other schools in our state where this could be an issue during our transformation period? So I'm just concerned about that being 51%. Till we stand up our
LI
comprehensive.
doesn't qualify.
I think LI does.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to worry about not
That's
just
LI.
myself,
Oh.
but there may be others in this situation of isolation that I don't want to have unintended consequences that might damage other kids. in the
I would
state
think
right now.
our four historic
Yeah.
all
think they
meet
do.
that easily.
Just trying to make sure I'm not unintended consequences that we're not thinking of.
I asked AOE for some of this information so that we were talking about so we know what we're talking
Yeah.
about. So I think Annie's forwarding the information that,
Yeah, I think it's.
but I'm still trying to figure out how to read it. I know it's not but this was the response for data from AOE to understand what schools we are talking about and what we are not.
And we may hear from them.
I'm trying, doing my best to read
Yeah.
that chart and the caveats.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody should have that.
I'm going to, unless people have more to say about it at the moment, we'll move on, but we will put this on the list of coming back tos.
I mean, I
Oh,
was just
sorry.
gonna say in response to, was it Representative Dobrovich that brought up the 51%. I mean, I would think that if the schools were essentially functioning as the public school because a town didn't have that, then they will be above the 51%. And if they aren't, then it doesn't make sense that the kids would have nowhere else to go, because if there were that many kids with nowhere else to go, then they would be going to that school. So it almost seems like a
Well-
mathematical impossibility.
But it's not mathematically impossible if there's just a higher number of students in that building that come from elsewhere.
Right.
You know, that may be the only school in town, but only 49 or 45% of the population happens to be those students, and the other 55% are boarding students from overseas. And I just don't know. You know, I just want to make sure we're not causing any
Okay.
harm unintentionally.
But in that case, if more than 51% of them were boarding students that came from other seas, should we be paying for that with our public tax dollars.
For the kids who have nowhere else to go to school.
This is only paying for students from Vermont.
No, I know, but like, I'm saying if the majority of the school, if it's an international, I don't know, like,
So you're
And
bringing
I
up
don't
a-
think it's probably the case. I just
Mhm.
want to make sure it's
You are-
not
you
the
are-
case in our transition
When
period.
you bring up, another issue that's been a thorn in my side about our lack of oversight of independent schools is that we have nothing that says you can't charge private pay people less than what you charge taxpayers. We don't even have that level of oversight.
Just an FYI, the election law, H.474 is up right now.
Oh, I
Anybody
have an
was wondering?
interest in that.
Apparently the amendments have been removed.
They've
Oh, that
withdrawn.
has been moved, so it's straight.
So
that's
they've
the one
withdrawn
that-
both.
Straight as it is.
Thank you.
They'll let us know. It's a roll call, right? Yeah, if it's
Yeah,
a roll
we'll know
call,
if it's a
they'll let
roll
us know, right?
Do we?
What's that?
If it's a roll call,
No.
Oh, we will definitely, yeah.
right?
Yeah, we don't have a bell in here, but so we
If
gotta
there's a
watch
roll
that.
call behind
And
that.
well, I'm sure a bunch of us will get a text.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's gonna go on the side percolate.
Anything else in this section you'd like to look at?
No, thank you for adding in the language about the process and waivers.
Yes, thank you.
The process and waivers.
Okay, we're gonna move on to some transition language. If you were to make section 10, if you were to pass section 10, advance section 10, section 11 goes with it. It's a transition language. A school district,
Sorry, you went over the therapeutic school.
it's I'm sorry. I asked if there were any questions about this section, but,
I forwarded you some language.
and I responded.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
Okay,
Thank you.
do you want to talk about it?
Sure, yes, so everybody knows, I got an email from the head of the Vermont Independent School Association about our definition of therapeutic school. I read it, thought, and then passed it on to Beth for consideration with the definition. I'm gonna generalize, the concern was that there are some therapeutic schools where not every student is on an IEP or a 504 plan. They might just might be a sort of extreme behavioral case or something. So anyway, yeah, if you have your thoughts on that.
I'm not gonna solve any problems, unfortunately. I think because you're creating a definition for a category of schools, from scratch, the definition should be built around what you want to sweep in. And so this is really a policy decision for you all to make, unfortunately. This definition matches what's in state board rule now. Again, I think this would be a question for the field, but I have been unable to find, a legal definition of this that is universally applicable in the same way that a section 504 plan is, or IDA is, the IEP program is. Those are pieces of federal law, so it's easy.
How does the state board use this definition?
It's just a listed definition in their definition section in the 2200 series.
So they do use the term therapeutic independent school?
They added that definition either in the most recent update or the 2022 update. But yes, they have a definition listed in their definition section for
More
therapeutic.
update?
Just H.167, establishing the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters Grant is up right now. Okay.
167.
Yes.
So Beth, are you saying what we have written here is identical to what's in current state board rule?
Yes, the state board rule has another sentence tacked onto it. Actually here, why don't I just pull it up?
Chair Conlon, what was the difference, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm pulling up the email
Good,
right
okay.
now.
So here's the state board, 2200 series and their definition of therapeutic school. They have therapeutic approved independent school, therapeutic independent school, or therapeutic school.
Oh,
And this sentence I have not included in the definition about the rate.
I think it's enrollment to students who are IEP or plan under 504. We have, okay.
So I'm wondering, did the change in the therapeutic independent schools from meeting this definition to expanding the definition to include the most extremist behavior, did that happen in the most recent years where AOE is not doing any sort of oversight on the independent schools?
I'll read the concerns that, the independent schools brought up. Some therapeutic schools, that serve students placed by a Vermont LEA, Vermont School District, as part of an IEP or 504 plan, also serve students, in other words, therapeutic schools, also serve students from out of state and out of country who are not always placed there through the formal IEP or 504 process. So there's sort of that issue. I'm not sure if that actually has an impact here. There are extreme situations where a student who is not on an IEP or 504 plan can be placed at a therapeutic school under the terms of a court order.
Hmm.
Seems like a pretty narrow exception.
I am a little wary of, if we have one already and it does not seem to be having an impact on the way we do business. We have a state board rule already. Sorry to get us bogged down in what is essentially wordsmithing, but it's probably important. Does anybody want to, Jay, please, yes.
For the record, Jay Nichols, Executive Director of the Vermont Principal Association. A possibility here could be where we have and who are enrolled, or who are enrolled pursuant to a written agreement in a local education agency in school. That way, if we have a student who's in crisis, is on an ESP plan or something like that, for whatever reason doesn't qualify for a 504 or IEP, it can still be placed in that school if the student's team agrees to do that. I think Oliver's right, there's very few cases, but there are a few of those that are out there. So that's a thought that you might want to consider.
It sounds, and
I
you're
like it.
solving it by changing and to or.
That's why I
And
think-
or.
And I think that's what I'm looking at.
I like a
I
simple
like it.
fix like that.
Sure.
Brilliant.
Any thoughts of the implications of doing that?
It makes sense to me. I'm just, again, you're creating a definition to capture a set of schools. So you need to decide what schools you want to capture, and then we can wordsmith it. If you want to limit schools that qualify under this definition to schools that limit their enrollment to only students on an IEP, a section 504 plan, or who are enrolled pursuant to a written agreement between a local LEA and the school, that works for me. You're not gonna get at the court placements or out of country placements
Well, out of country shouldn't impact us.
or private placements.
Right. So I would ask, so what? What impact does that have on the sort of use of the term therapeutic approved independent school?
Right now, the only way this is defined, to my knowledge, in state laws and the state board rules.
Yeah.
So I would say it's technically a legally defined term, and this is that definition.
Yeah.
You can create your own definition in statute, which is what this is proposing to do. And it can be different from what the state board has done. And this is a policy choice as to who you want to sweep in. So if you if you are okay with excluding schools from being considered therapeutic approved independent schools who also accept out of state private payer that is not someone who's not on an IEP or a Section 504 plan and who wasn't placed by their local education agency or out of country, then I think the or is fine. But if you want to include that, I don't think the or gets at that.
Okay. All right. I'm not trying to exclude any of what we traditionally think of as a therapeutic independent school.
I think that's the, from my perspective, that is the conundrum you all are faced with is what is it? You are deciding what qualifies as a therapeutic approved independent school.
Could you work some of that language to make sure that we are not excluding a therapeutic school that meets all of this, but also might have private pay, overseas, court ordered?
Yes. Yes, if that is what you would like. I think there are consequences to that, right? To me, it's really hard to create a definition without understanding who would be swept in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You have brought what you have been given, and it is totally okay if you're fine with this, is broad descriptions. No concrete examples of what that school is.
On subject, but a little bit off subject. Us creating this definition here, does it impact other statutes where we're talking about independent schools, such as the moratorium on independent schools?
Great question.
I would say no, a therapeutic approved independent school is still an approved independent school, and the moratorium is on all approved independent schools. It's just a subset there. The definition, adding this definition is just a way to, honestly, to avoid having to repeat lines 16 through 19 every time you're trying to make a carve out for therapeutic schools.
Yeah.
Because there is no definition for one right now in Title 16.
This doesn't say that that's just what they do. Right? It doesn't say that a therapeutic approved independent school doesn't have private pay, doesn't have out of state. It
No.
says it has this.
No,
But
it
doesn't say
limits
exclusively, right?
enrollment
The enrollment.
to students, so it doesn't,
Okay.
so.
That was, oh yeah, there it is, limits enrollment.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think of the situation of the narrow piece is maybe there's a student that the education agency, they think that's the best placement for them. But everything, the paperwork isn't in place yet. The IEP hasn't been made official yet, or the 504 plan. So are they just in limbo in that time being, not being able to be there? You know, so that or solves that for that very small number of students. It's like, well, we put you there, but gotta wait another month till the plan's in play.
All right, so you posed questions to us that were a little apathetic about answering. You go ahead, Jan.
Wow.
You're gonna solve it for us.
No,
right?
I don't think I am. But is there somewhere just to insert language that for purposes of limiting enrollment to students, can we just put something in there about Vermont students that would help us?
But what if that
Enrollment
Vermont
again.
student is there
Yeah.
under a court order? The same thing was going through my head.
Yeah.
Or is it extreme circumstance?
I mean, you can just add or, again, this is all a matter of who you want to sweep in or to be covered by this definition. If you want to ensure that students who are placed who are not on an IEP and not on a 504 plan are placed there through some sort of court order, you can just add that to the end of line 19, right? Somewhere in there. And yes, you could say limits enrollment to Vermont students who are on, et cetera.
Enrollment
Or
of
just
Vermont.
Say like for purposes of Vermont students, limits enrollment to students,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. 'Cause then if you're a student from New Hampshire, or you're a student from Sweden, you fall outside the scope of all of this.
So I just wanna orient you, and I promise you, I am not trying to push you in a policy direction at all. I just wanna make sure you understand the context to which you are making this decision, and that is the use of the term therapeutic or the adding of this definition is so that from a drafting perspective, the most often I would use the term therapeutic and approved independent school is to provide exceptions. So you are approved independent schools are going to be excluded from some requirements on approved
Right.
independent schools. And so I would just encourage you to think about which schools are being excluded from those requirements. And are you sweeping in the right schools? Are you being over-inclusive? Are you being under-inclusive? Because that means that these schools do not have to comply with class size requirements, do not have to have 51%, do not have to be located in Vermont. Actually, nope, yep, located in Vermont or another state or country. So I think whatever you decide is fine from a legal perspective, but what you are
Here-
sweeping in.
All right, so here is what we are not wanting to exclude,
Okay,
which probably, it would be a therapeutic school,
mhm,
using the definition that we use here. But let's say they do have placements from out of state or out of the country
mhm,
that are there for those services, but don't meet this definition because they aren't there under an IEP or section 504
Okay.
in Canada.
Okay.
But yet their, sort of main purpose for being is a therapeutic school in Vermont, providing services to students on IEPs and 504s. Under sort of a strict interpretation of this definition, would they not be included?
no, this doesn't say anything about out of state or private payers. It's just, I'm sorry, say that again. It's
Right.
someone who's not on an IEP or section 504 plan?
Yes, because they came from a place that doesn't have 504s and IEPs.
So that would only be out of country because
Yeah.
that's federal law, so.
Yeah.
Or it would be a student who doesn't qualify for those services
Right.
and would be placed there privately. I will come up with language for that.
And I just want to remind us of the purpose here is to exempt them from the class size minimums like we are doing sort of within a public school about sort of pull-out services.
Well, update. 218, which was the opioid settlement, was delayed, so now they're on to H 397, which is miscellaneous amendments to the statutes governing emergency management and flood response.
That's the bill.
Why did you do that? So I'll do
I think I might have signed out of that one.
Chris, they're gonna text for roll calls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They'll all be texted.
Yeah.
Plus that. Full range. Although I'm not sure there's really anything roll call-y on the calendar.
You never know these.
I don't know.
You never know.
Never know.
All right, I apologize, everybody, for spending some time on that.
No, words
But that-
matter.
I really, it seemed like a legit concern from the
Yeah.
folks who have to follow the rules of being a therapeutic school.
Okay.
Do you want the language to be that Vermont, the limitation to enrollment would be for Vermont students to be on an IEP or 504 plan, or do you just want a free-for-all? That if a school functions, I mean, this is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's a
appreciate it.
narrow, okay.
Yes. What about the court order? What about?
I can add the court order language, but beyond the court order, would you like a school that accepts students who are not Vermont students that does not limit its enrollment? And so it would accept a Vermont student that is not on an IEP, not on a 504 plan, not enrolled pursuant to a local agreement by the LEA or a court order, but the parents think it's the best
No.
placement for the child.
No, I don't want to limit it.
So it would need to limit its enrollment for Vermont students to these categories and the court order.
Yes.
I think that's, I was trying to say, not very well.
But we're not saying that if you accept students from out of state, you're
Or
not,
overseas,
you can still do all of that.
but you still meet the
But when it
definition
comes
of
to
therapeutic
Vermont
approved independent
students,
school.
this
Yeah.
applies to the Vermont students.
Right. Would you like to move to
We do
section
not
11?
get paid enough.
Love to.
Do you want to move to section 11?
Sure. Yes.
Tuition transition. So this language would really only go if section 10 stays in. So a school district, and that should probably say that instead of who, school district that pays tuition pursuant to the provisions of chapter 21 in effect on June 30th, 2025, shall continue to pay tuition on behalf of a resident student enrolled for the 24-25 school year in, or who has been accepted for enrollment for the 25-26 school year by an approved independent school subject to the provisions of section 828 in effect on June 30th, 2025, till such time as that student graduates from that school. So if someone is already attending an approved independent school, or they've been accepted for next year, they would still be entitled to tuition from their district to that school of their choice, even if that school didn't meet the changes that you just made above.
Grandfathering,
So grandfather,
right?
basically, right?
Glide path.
Glide path,
So this
I like
glide
that.
path then would be if this all takes effect, and a student is going to school at a boarding school in Connecticut, we would still meet their needs until they graduate. They would still qualify for the equivalent of the town tuition program.
That's what this says, but you can certainly make other policy decisions, yeah.
Everybody clear on the impact of what that says? So in other words, if we move forward with what we have and the options were more limited, it would not, remove the option for those who are already in certain programs.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't think that we really want to be doing any harm and disrupting a student's education.
All right.
So we've moved on to a new reader assistance heading, statewide cohesion. So we've gone through the scale section. Now we're on to statewide cohesion. So the intent section for this bucket, if you will, is the intent of the General Assembly to consolidate structures and systems that are foundational to the administration of education.
I did one of my tiniest homework. I wrote that in 10 seconds. Few more sentences to go, but.
So section 13, I'm on page 27, line 11. Section 13 is a whole bunch of to-dos for the Agency of Education. The first two are to actually operationalize something, and then the rest are a report back to you all. So subsection A requires, and again, I just plunked dates in here. I'm sure they're wrong. I'm sure someone's going to be very upset that I'm asking them to do all this work in this amount of time. You can change them. On or before January 1st, 2026, the Agency of Education shall recommend to the State Board of Education standards for statewide proficiency-based graduation requirements based on standards adopted by the State Board.
So, committee, that's a tight deadline that we're asking the AOE to do this. I'm throwing that out there for our consideration, not to discuss right now, because we're gonna run through all these, but to think about.
Go process wise.
Yep.
They're recommending, and then it's the state board that's doing that with our rulemaking process. So.
Which is currently,
Current
the
the way
state
it works.
board is in charge of.
Yes, and we haven't really talked about what happens after the agency makes those
Yeah.
recommendations. There's nothing in this draft currently that then requires the State Board to consider them and update the education quality standards. So we can add that back up in the State Board rule section where they're making other amendments to EQS.
I would say yes.
Yeah, we need to do that.
I do worry about the timeline a little bit. I mean,
That's pretty tight.
schools took years to do this on their own, to make our own individual proficiency-based graduation requirements in our own schools, because the AOE thought that was a great idea for us to do it ourselves. And now we're gonna ask them to do it. And the timeline should be shorter because they could reach out to all of the schools, pull what everybody's doing and try to mash it all together. But we already know that they're short-staffed and aren't keeping up with the work that they need to be doing. So I'm just wondering if putting January 1st of 2026 is realistic. And maybe we don't care if it's realistic.
We research them.
I have a little bit of concern about how quickly that can be turned around as well. However, maybe it's something that the AOE could weigh in on, and we will ask them to do that. And I would just say that they are making a recommendation to the state board. The state board then also has its own
I wonder what
process.
that, like, just pragmatically what that entails, making a recommendation. I think that's common for rules is
Mhm.
AOE like proposes something, then it goes to the state board for formal rulemaking. So I don't know what proposed, how thorough it is, what that really means they have to do. It's good.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it as is. I'm happy to ask Lindsay at the AOE to provide any reaction should they have any.
But then to your other question about state board, yes, you've got to go through rulemaking and do it. I think in the superintendent's timeline that was suggested, that was by 2027. We have like, I think it takes about 6 months for the state board to do rulemaking.
I would say closer to 8, if not more.
So stacking up a lot of rules. Get our budget request from the state board.
All right, let's move on to statewide. Did you have more to say on?
No, I would like to put what you're saying in about like when the state board has to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've already made a note of that.
Oh, okay, right.
There were lots of nodding heads.
By what date though?
I would say if you keep, oh, sorry.
The question is, by what date shall the state
State
board?
board, yeah.
August 1st, 2026?
Oh,
No, they'd have to be,
I mean, this is a question for the state board on how
Yeah.
fast they could turn them around.
yeah.
Rulemaking in and of itself is a long process, and
Right.
if there's any amount of public input that, there is public input built into the Administrative Procedures Act requirements, but that can be expansive, right? There can be lots of public input, or there could be bare minimum. So if there's lots of public input, that could take longer. When would you want, I think maybe work backwards, when would you want the graduation requirements to be in effect for? What graduating class?
The proposal from the superintendents was the class
FY
of
27.
2031.
So that would be,
You would need to back that off 4 years, should be 27.
So that's
That's
having them,
what theirs is.
so
And we
July
need a-
1, 2027?
It's
so you phone a
FY.
friend for somebody who's worked in school administration a while, like, are we
Makes sense.
So
in the ballpark of,
Yeah, that makes sense.
okay.
So the recommendation
4-year period.
would be due to the state board by January 1st. They would then have the entire process that they have to have in place by 27.
FY
Okay, so
27.
which is a year and a half of rulemaking, public response, all of that. That seems reasonable.
Okay, I will add that.
I'll tell you when we had Armando Villasega in here talking about basic competencies, it was from all the old days of the previous round, one of the previous rounds of graduation requirements that I lived through. Great. Okay, calendar time.
On or before January 15th, 2026. Again, I was not giving any thought to these dates. I was just plugging them in. The Secretary of Education shall develop and publish a statewide calendar for the public schools of the state, including career and technical centers. It shall be in effect in the 2027-2028 academic year and after. And then there's a requirement for them to come back to you all with the list of the statutory amendments necessary to go back to a statewide calendar.
Okay, let me just, was there anything in 454 as presented that had a date attached to this?
To.
Let's look.
Great, just like Aaron and Josh.
That's for you, Casey. and
Next year,
Chris.
We will create a subcommittee of legislators, one for Williston.
With pitchforks.
And
I
a-
couldn't believe. I was drafting
What,
my draft
what would be
calendar.
harder for this committee, to come up with a
It's coming
calendar
now.
or to draw lines?
So,
Our
H,
meeting.
Page 454, as introduced on page 127, line 16. There's an amendment requiring the secretary to establish a single statewide calendar, which would be published before May of each year of the following school year, and I believe. Let's see. Hold on.
Secretary shall set.
Let's see, what section is this? This is
Section 1. Before first each year.
section 20.
On page.
Okay. So section 20
Or I want
Take a-
27.
affects.
So I want
Yeah.
27.
All right, so let's. That's to have it. That is
This
to have it
section-
implemented?
There was not that nuance here.
Alright.
It
Or would
was,
just be published?
it was an amendment to the section requiring regional calendars. And instead of requiring regional calendars, it was replacing that with a requirement that the secretary develop a calendar. And that would take effect on July 1, 2027, but I don't believe there's any like implementation or transition language.
Okay.
So that change in the law would take place on July 1, 2027. So if they weren't required to develop that calendar until July 1, 2027, they're either ready to go for the next school year because they know it's coming, or they need time.
School calendars usually get published like early,
April.
early in the new year, early in the new year.
Kate's got her hand up, so you patiently go right ahead.
I'm wondering how this happens, taking collective bargaining
There's a huge.
into account.
That is not contemplated here. I will, spoiler alert, a little bit further down. This bill requires the Agency of Education to come back to you all with, how to address collective bargaining agreement for both educators and staff in the new system. So TBD.
So
Before they make the calendar, like I'm not understanding. How can you make a calendar when we have different CBAs out there that say, I'm gonna work 190 days and she's gonna work 188 days and.
I don't mean to be flip.
Yep.
Just pick a new date. Like, this is the dates need to be changed.
so Kate, what you're talking about are the challenges in front of the AOE to do this work?
Yes,
Yes, which is why we don't have one. However, it was in their proposal in 454, something they want, and I would say that is something for them to solve.
do they understand what's involved in solving?
They're going to, if they don't, they're going to learn. I do not believe that the legislature or the state board or the agency has the power to sort of override collective bargaining agreements. So they're gonna have to figure out how to resolve that. Which that sounds sort of admonishing, but it's their proposal.
It's been a collective goal for so many,
Yeah.
I mean. Schools want it, CTEs need it, there's a lot of. Things that this touches, this will then impact summer and after school programs, this will affect, so many.
Vacations might be
I know,
nice
and then
if
we'll
your
hear from-
mom who works in one district has the
Yes,
same
and that is
vacation
it.
as the kids in another.
That is a challenge in our so. These are walls people have run into for
I mean, this is
ever,
gonna,
so we have to find some new way to. get
Yeah,
people
again,
off.
this is something they want. Um. I think it's great.
I guess
They're gonna have to figure out how it's gonna happen.
because we have different places are negotiating at different times. And part of what they negotiate is the length of the contract. And if we're talking about a statewide calendar, we're talking about a length of a contract. So I'm just not sure that you can put in a date like January 15th, 2026, if you have people bargaining in that year. Then by the time we see the calendar, it's too late
I
and
think
you've
you're absolutely-
bargained.
I think you're absolutely right.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's not our problem, you're saying.
Was that?
It's not our problem.
Well, no, that is a problem that we can help solve by changing that date to July 1st, 2027. Which, if this bill makes it to the governor's desk and it is signed, hopefully would be the signal to the AOE to start working with school districts to say, when you're negotiating, please bear in mind that we're going to have a consistent statewide calendar. Yeah. It's a tricky job that they have asked us to ask them to do.
May need to be rolling implementation, so take that into account.
And, you know, they may very well come back to us on January 1st, 2026 and say, could you please, it's harder than we thought, could you please delay that? So, I'm hearing that we will change the date to July 1st, 2027.
Do you want to push out the effect of the academic year to
Yeah.
2029, 2028? 2029?
I don't want to.
Regionally, yes, I'm in support of doing this. I'm not trying to talk us out of it. I'm just identifying a problem that I see. Regionally, I think some of the holidays that the kids in Burlington are gonna need off are not gonna match up with the holidays that the kids in the Northeast Kingdom need off. And I think some of my community members will have some things to say about that. I'm supportive of doing this. I would
Yes.
like to say that.
Yep.
But I've seen this happen before with some new holidays we added to the calendar a few years ago. And people made a really big deal out of it.
Yes.
I don't know what the solution is. So if you guys could tell me, that would be great.
They're on their own.
Put it on the AOE and blame them.
All right, so, we are going to sort of
No, holiday spring.
push through until section 14, at which point we'll take a break, unless all of a sudden these develop lots of conversations.
So we're on page 28, line 4. Now this is a report due back to you all and a series of discrete topics. So on or before December 1st, AOE submits a written report to you all and legislative language as applicable with recommendations for the following. In consultation with educators and administrators, proposed statewide financial data and student information systems, including a detailed implementation plan for the statewide systems to be operational for use in fiscal year 2029, and the costs associated with procurement and implementation.
So just, the $4 million budget that we had a presentation on last week, includes this. So we're just saying, give us a report on how it's going.
And 2029 was part of that. I wasn't here that day. I didn't see it.
I think the fiscal year 2029 matches the likely implementation of or operationalized new school districts. Yes, mental
Thank you.
with that.
Line 13, a school construction division within AOE, including position descriptions and job duties for each position within the division. A detailed description of the assistance division would provide to the field and the overall role the agency would play within a state aid to school construction program. line 18.
Anybody
Clear,
want to take a guess who may have come up with line 18?
Yeah, I saw that.
Clear, unambiguous.
It's not like a patent, Craig.
clear, unambiguous guidance that would be provided to school officials and school board members regarding the business processes and transactions that would need to occur to facilitate school district mergers into larger consolidated school districts, including the merging of data systems, asset and liability transfers, and how to address collective bargaining agreements for both educators and staff. The report shall include a detailed description of how the agency will provide support and consolidation assistance to the field in each of these areas and an estimate of the costs associated with such work.
Questions on that?
If I can just make a comment, it sort of links back to my last question. The work that needs to be done to go through this, boy, statewide finance system would be awfully handy to have in place.
Yeah.
And all of that, and 2029 was just alarming me, that's all. So your explanation I understood, but at the same time, we did ask the question, or maybe I did, about how far off we were from it, and would we have to completely start a brand new system, and they told us no. So,
Yeah, and I
quicker the
think,
better.
the process would clearly start before 2029, have it in place. So
Thank you.
I'm doubting my own requirement here. Just because the rollout's a little bit, I might say, rather than actually providing the detailed guidance, I think I might be fine with saying providing a roadmap and providing that guidance. And this is by like January 1st. And I'm feeling like this is actually asking a lot if our rollout is in 2 years, that it's in 4 years than that, 4 years. So I think I would be perfectly comfortable saying something that isn't saying you have to have all the guidance in place by then, but that you have to report to the General Assembly a progress report on providing school districts, school officials and school board members. I'm quite how to say this, my friend's all trying to wordsmith. Do you get my concept here?
No, just say it in plain English.
Rather than saying that they need to, on January 1st, provide all of that clear, unambiguous guidance. I would guess, given the sort of time frame of rolling things out, I would just like to have a status update as to where they stand on providing that clear, unambiguous guidance.
So a plan.
On developing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
A progress report on development of clear, unambiguous guidance that would be provided.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to 4?
Yeah. Just so everybody knows, number 4 is pulled directly from page 454.
In consultation with superintendents, directors of therapeutic independent schools, special educators, and in the opinion of the agency, other experts, the need for cooperative education services and the oversight of therapeutic schools within the school governance framework, both at the state and local level.
A welcome activity. All right. Break time. Rachel, something you want?
Nope.
On the topic?
Nope.
All right. Break time, what's on the floor right now? And what's next?
Miscellaneous amendments to statutes governing emergency management. Next is housing.
Why don't we do is that? We'll do a full half hour, so people can spend some time on the floor. Come back at 4:30. that sound like a plan? I mean, people can absolutely propose other ideas. Yes.
I think we should keep moving. I
Keep
think 15-minute break and let's keep
So
moving.
we might, the housing bill, we might need to be more